Hello, everyone in Alpha Chi. My name is Jedlicka. I'm a senior studying at Missouri Valley College. I'm majoring in sports management, and I want to share with you a project which I was originally supposed to present at the 2020 Alpha Chi National Convention. I will present my research project called NCAA versus NAIA, a statistical analysis of average scores in men's collegiate golf. I completed this study as an honors contract project for business statistics class during my junior year. In the next about 10 minutes, I'm going to introduce the topic of my research, describe the data collection process, outline the two statistical methods used to analyze the data, and discuss the implications of my research. So let's start with the introduction. To explain how I got the idea to do this research, I should mention that I have been competing in college golf at the NAIA level for 3.5 years. I've been lucky enough to be a part of a team which got to face off against the best NAIA teams in the nation. And it was precisely then, after seeing the highest ranked players in the country, when I thought, hold on, these guys cannot be that much worse than the NCAA D1 players, right? I tried to find some studies comparing NAIA athletes with their peers from NCAA D1, but all I could find was broad quotes of college coaches. Some of them were saying that NAIA is not as good as NCAA, others referred to the level of play between the two associations as comparable. Unfortunately, there was very little quantifiable evidence to support either of the two views. I decided to change that with this research. The purpose of this study was to quantify and compare the level of play of the best NCAA D1 and NAIA men's golf programs in the United States. I narrowed down the scope of the research to only the best schools from each association because I wanted to make a fair comparison. There would be very little sense in comparing the best NCAA teams against the worst from NAIA or vice versa. My objectives included studying the overall average scores, as well as the rate at which they have been changing over the past decade. At that time, it was between 2008 and 2018. I wanted to find out if college golfers have improved over the 10 seasons, if the two associations are evolving at a similar pace, and what can be predicted for the future of men's collegiate golf. Now I'm going to describe the data gathering process. My original intention for collecting the data for the study was to use the individual golfer rankings from the official scoring website of American Collegiate Golf, golfstat.com. Unfortunately, I found out that the rankings from prior to 2016 were not available to public. I emailed GolfStat with the request for providing the data in exchange for sharing the results of my study, and the answer was a clear no. Therefore, I decided to use a different approach. I took a simple random sample of 5 teams from the top 20 nationally ranked programs for both NAIA and NCAA, and then I searched the separate university statistical archives for the results of their 5 best players every year. In total, this meant trying to find 250 data points for each association. 5 teams, 5 players, 10 years, 5 times 5 times 10, 250, obviously. If that sounds like a lot of work, it was. However, this method actually provided a fairer comparison of best men's golf programs than my original idea, because it took into consideration the scores of all 5 team members instead of pinpointing only the best players from a larger number of schools. So in the end, I would like to thank GolfStat for the rejection of my request because it made my research more accurate, and also because it kept me from being bored by giving me some additional hours of work. This is a small demonstration of how the data tables looked for the NCAA and for the NAIA. As you can see from the sample size here, I was not able to collect all 250 data points for NAIA. Unfortunately, most of the NAIA programs simply did not track their statistics for the entire research time period, especially during the first years. Nevertheless, 173 individual scoring averages over 10 years is still a large enough sample to make this research valid and relevant. The first part of the statistical analysis of the data was comparing the overall 10-year mean scores between the two associations. The goal was to find if there is a statistically significant difference between the two overall means. The null hypothesis was that the average for NCAA D1 equaled the average for NAIA. The alternate hypothesis was that the two did not equal. Because this was a two-sample test with unknown but assumedly unequal population standard deviations, These were the formulas used for computing the degrees of freedom and calculated p-statistic. You can see them on the screen right now. I used the 95% confidence level throughout the study. I computed the critical t-values to be negative and positive 1.96, and because the calculated t-statistic was negative 13.019, and therefore outside of the critical interval, I could reject my null hypothesis. What this meant was that the overall 10-year scoring average in the NCAA was indeed significantly lower than in the NAIA. In other words, the sampled NCAA golfers were better overall. Just remember that in golf, the lower the score, the better. The second part of my study was a linear regression analysis. What I wanted to find out was whether the scores in the NCAA D1 and NAIA have got better, worse, or stayed the same over the past decade. To be able to answer this question, I paired the overall yearly mean scores with the corresponding season in the table that you can see right now. Then I performed a separate regression analysis for each of the two associations. For both, the null hypothesis was that the slope of the regression equation was equal to 0, and the alternate was that the slope differed from 0. After determining the rejection intervals, I used the formula on the screen to calculate the two separate t-statistics. Because the computed t-values for both NAIA and NCAA lied outside of the critical t-values, I was able to reject the null hypotheses for both datasets and provide, again with a 95% confidence level, that there is a significant relationship between the average scores and time in both associations. To provide a graphic illustration, I constructed the scatter chart with incorporated linear trend lines, line equations, and coefficients of determination R-squared, which you can see on the bottom. The R-squared values tell us that in the NAIA sample, 71.2% of the change in the scores happened due to the natural long-term evolution of scoring, compared to only 49.4% of the same effect in the NCAA. The remaining variation in scores is a result of other factors. In golf, those could be, for example, different playing conditions for different teams, or outstanding results of certain individual players. From this graph, it is clear that the average scores in both associations were getting lower, therefore better, over time in the chosen research period. However, we can also see that the NAIA scores, represented by the red line, were improving at a faster rate. I looked at this graph and I thought to myself, well, the two lines will obviously cross at some point in the future. Therefore, my model suggests that the NAIA scores should catch up with the NCAA. So I decided to calculate this point in the future by setting the two line equations equal to one another and then solving for x. The result was x equaled 18.43. So my statistical model predicts that the mean yearly scores in the two associations should equalize approximately 18.43 years after the start of the research period, or in the year 2028. Now, if this is a realistic expectation is a different subject matter. And this brings me into the final part of my presentation, the interpretation of the findings. First, it seems clear that despite the fast rate of improvement in the NAIA scores, the NCAA D1 men's golf is still at a higher level overall. The difference of the overall averages over the entire decade is nearly 3 strokes per round per player, which would add up to more than a 10-shot difference per team for each tournament round. And this is a logical outcome. The very best junior players in the world are recruited by the top NCAA D1 programs, whose superior practice facilities, renowned reputations, and the long history of tournament success simply cannot be matched by the smaller NAIA schools operating on tighter recruiting budgets. However, this research also proved that the gap between the level of play in the best men's golf tournament in NCAA and NAIA is closing. While the NAIA programs might have a tough time attracting the absolute best young golfers interested in becoming student athletes, there is now a much wider pool of players with the same intentions who are not too far behind the talent and skill of the young stars. Simply, while the very best players remain on top, they now have a much deeper and closer competition. This is why it is very improbable that the equalization of scoring averages between the two associations will ever happen in reality. The expected near future still includes the very best golfers playing for the big NCAA D1 programs, but the gap between them and the next best players is going to keep shrinking. it is unlikely that by 2028, the best NAIA male golfers will average the same scores as their NCAA D1 peers, as my model suggests. But they should definitely be fewer shots behind than they were in 2008 or even 2018. So to summarize, this study used simple random sampling and 2 different statistical methods to analyze and provide numerical evidence for the difference in the overall standard of play and the pace of improvement in the top 20 nationally ranked NCAA D1 and NAIA men's golf teams. All the null hypotheses were rejected at the 95% confidence level, which resulted in reliable proof that while the NCAA continues to have an edge in the overall scores, the NAIA golfers have been getting better at a faster pace. For the future, follow-up research, including more teams and longer research time periods, should be possible, as the programs in both NAIA and NCAA include their statistical archives on their websites more regularly. And while I'm showing the sources that I used for this project, I would also like to thank Professor Larry Stockman, who taught my business statistics class and helped me with this project, and also Dr. Chris Libby, who is the Alpha Chi sponsor for Missouri Valley College. And I also want to thank the whole Alpha Chi National Collegiate Honor Society and everyone involved in making it possible for us students to present our work despite the difficult current circumstances. While sharing our research online is not quite the same as it would be at the National Convention, I still appreciate this opportunity very much. I know for myself that recording this video made my social distancing days more enjoyable and interesting, and I hope that this presentation will have a similar positive effect on at least some of my audience. And lastly, I would like to thank all the viewers who somehow stumbled on this video. Thank you and stay safe.